Hi, I'm Stathis, your host. Before we jump in this episode, let me introduce DevRelX. DevRelX is a hub for developer marketing and DevRel professionals. Stay home while DevRelX brings you rich content to boost your DevRel game. Access developer population insights, news, job openings, and more. Discover how to empower developers and grow communities at devrelx.com. Today's episode will start with a quote from our guest.
So that's kind of my personal challenge. As for the other side, and that's a very common, is how do you measure, right? How do you measure success? But that's sort of usually the question, right?
Welcome to Under the Hood of Developer Marketing, a podcast from Slashdata. I'm Jo Stitchberry, one of the senior analysts in the team, and today I'm joined by Max Katz from IBM. Max, thanks for joining us. We've not met before, so please could you introduce yourself to me and to the listeners?
Yes, hi. Thanks for inviting me. So my name is Max Katz, and I am right now with IBM, and I lead the North America West Developer Advocacy team. Although we cover the West region, but we spend most of the time in the San Francisco Bay Area, sort of for obvious reasons. Before that, I was at a company called Appri.io, also here in San Francisco Bay Area. It's a small startup, and I launched their advocacy program. But again, because it was a small company, I did a little bit of everything: advocacy, support, product. Sort of everything in between. But it was a lot of fun because we were able to grow the community from basically 0 to 400,000 developers. So That was a lot of fun. Before that, I was at a company called XRL, and it's a professional services organization, more in the role of a sales engineer, which I guess back then that was the developer evangelist role or name. Back then, I think. And then before that, I was at a small startup, and my first job was at evi.com.
Oh, right, yes.
Yeah, so that's...
And I believe you're a Java developer by trade, is that correct?
Correct. So that's how I started as a Java developer at evi.com. So I guess joined the real world just at the very end of the first .com boom or crash, however you want to call it. At evi.com, that's how I started.
I see. Yes, and I believe you've written for DZone as well, which is something that I've done. So perhaps I should introduce myself a bit more to you, because I was also a developer initially. C++. I started out working for Scion Software and then Symbian on mobile devices, and then went to work for Nokia and Sony Ericsson. And I later moved into publishing and technical writing when I realised just how difficult it was to find good explanations of the difficult subjects, particularly mobile software development, which is quite esoteric. And I've worked since in a number of teams, mostly in developer marketing, writing content for developers, but also as a product manager designing portals. And I currently work with Slashdata as a senior analyst and recently edited our multi-author book on developer marketing. And one of my side projects is working as a zone leader on DZone with their performance zone and also on their artificial intelligence zone. And I believe that you've also written for DZone, is that right?
Correct, yes. So I joined their MVP program, Most Valuable Blogger program, many years ago. Where I guess, right, you publish on your own blog and then they pick up some interesting articles and then republish on DZone. So yes, it's been working really well.
So so DZone is one of those places. It was very specifically for Java developers at the time. Is that what you were writing about when you were blogging?
Yes. So I started it was Java, but I guess now they cover everything, right? So I started with Java, and I think it was even more specifically kind of the enterprise Java. I started writing about how to, sort of build enterprise web applications. So that's really how I started my blogging career. But yes, as I said, I think they cover everything.
Yeah, absolutely everything. And do you think you need to be a developer to be effective in developer relations? I mean, you said you worked with a startup and you did a bit of everything, so you were doing a bit of product. So, I mean, clearly you need to be a developer to do that. But in a larger organisation, and this is kind of a question that I think a lot of our listeners may be asking, because they may not be developers and they're thinking getting into dev marketing, but they're not sure if it's for them because they're not technically necessarily that experienced. So, what would be your advice to them?
Yeah, so I think it could help in some situations, but I don't think it's a requirement. I guess it could be helpful if you're a developer. If you're writing sample applications or trying to fix a bug. So that definitely helps. But even in those situations, it's not sort of a requirement. You can always sort of learn. But I'm sure under this sort of developer relations umbrella, there are different sort of roles. And one of them sort of is like a community manager, right? And I think usually they're not necessarily have a developer background. So just for example, I have a programs person on my team, and she's amazing, and she's basically our community manager. She runs and executes all our events. Again, just an amazing, and she doesn't have a traditional technical background, but she still does extremely well, and again runs our community.
I think often you just need the empathy, really, for if somebody's got a problem, it's finding somebody else to connect them to, or it's working out what people want in an event, whether they want quiet zones or whether they want a full-on entertainment and hustle and bustle of a busy conference meeting area. So it's more about the empathy with the persona of the developer community as much as anything, isn't it? Getting under the skin of the developers that you're working with.
Correct. Yeah, no, I agree. And again, just going back to the person, that on my team, she has a lot of energy. And she welcomes everyone. She says hello to everyone, to every person who comes to our events. Yeah, and if anyone needs help, she knows how to, she'll help, of course, but if she can always find the right people to help that person. So absolutely, yes.
Yeah. I think so often we've heard on the podcast that developer relations is a lot about, it's just about making connections. It's about knowing the stuff itself. And just because you don't, you can't possibly know everything about even your product, but it's finding the person who does, and it's representing, the developer to them and then to the developer, isn't it? So that everybody gets the best out of that relationship. So what I'd really like to come back to a little is the kind of comparison between when you worked in a startup and you built a huge developer program with great success, to working for IBM, which is obviously has got a massive presence already. What would you say would be the major difference, and how do you kind of handle dev marketing differently?
Yes, so going from a small startup to IBM, so I've been at IBM for a little bit over 2 years, but at the beginning I used to say it's like moving to a different country. Because it is so massive and just so many people. But yeah, at a startup, we were probably 30 or so people. You get to do a little bit of everything. Support, fixing bugs, and some product management, and doing demos, and also of course traveling, and everything in between. IBM is obviously is a little bit different. They're a lot more sort of structured. There are a lot more different teams, and they do something a lot more specific. So again, for example, my team, as I mentioned, we cover the North America West region for developer advocacy, and most of the time, again, we provide developer education, and we host events and we run events, in-person events, and also online events. And we also write content. But now, although we do have an opportunity, for example, to work on an SDK or maybe fix a bug, most of the time we spend on developer education. And then, for example, we have a separate team that their main job is to develop content, or what we call, there are these code patterns. If you visited IBM developer website, you probably saw them. But these are a code pattern is kind of is a complete solution. It has you've got the code on GitHub, you got a short tutorial, you got a video, you got an architecture diagram. So kind of everything you need is kind of a out of the box solution that you can just deploy, and you can use it as a starting point, or you can break it and then fix it. So there's a whole separate team that does that. And then we also have developer marketing separate from developer advocacy. And then we have a big organization that they work on open source. So again, developer relations, developer advocacy, but sort of more in the context of open source. Right. So it's a lot more sort of structured at IBM than at small startups, for example, I think.
Yeah, it's quite partitioned, isn't it? But I guess in some ways you feel like you can, because you're doing one thing and you're focused on that, you can really see the progress that you're making and just how that's contributing, because you're completely sort of siloed onto that. And so as time elapses, you see the uptake of it, and I guess you see where you're going right, and you can adjust where you're going wrong. What would you say has been the biggest challenge at IBM?
Yeah, no, exactly. Just to go back, yeah, absolutely, because it allows us to sort of concentrate and focus on, delivering, high quality developer education. And also just quickly to mention, so there's the North America West team, but there are also other teams. There's a New York team that they cover North America East. There are teams in Europe and also in Asia. And then there are also what we call sort of global advocates. Don't belong to any specific geographical area. A lot more structured than at least my other previous company. And so you asked me, what are some of the challenges?
Yes.
So I think for me personally, one challenge was, and still I think it's a more of a learning experience, is moving from being an individual contributor to a manager in developer relations, developer advocacy. So that's a challenge, but I think it's a good challenge. I mean, it's a really great learning experience, and I'm still learning. But that's sort of my personal, I guess, challenge. I mean, there are a lot of individual sort of contributors, a lot of really amazing people out there, but there are probably sort of fewer leaders in developer advocacy space. But even though I think it's growing as more and more companies sort of understand the value of developer relations and they hire these people. So that's kind of my personal challenge. As for the other side is, and that's a very common, is how do you measure, right? How do you measure success? But that's sort of usually the question, right?
Exactly. I mean, that's it. You can't easily apply metrics, can you, to developer marketing, particularly not in a small community. But I guess when you've got so many different groups and units, perhaps it's a little easier. Well, how do you do it?
Yeah, so it's finding. So for us, as one of the KPIs that we have is number of active developers on our cloud platform, and so that's probably very similar to other companies have, like how many API calls or how many projects were created. So that's one KPI, and it's sort of finding this balance, right? Because this is number of active developers, something you can easily measure. But then there's this whole other side where, it's just sort of, it's helping developers, it's sort of winning their hearts and minds, right? And that's, as very difficult to measure. And you meet someone today and, and maybe in 6 months or a year, I remember we went to an IBM developer meetup and, they helped me, learn this or do this, but now I'm ready to try what they showed me. So I think this is challenging to measure. Something that will sort of happens in 6 or 12 months. So I think it's a balance, right? So I think you need to be able to measure something, and then the other side is what I just mentioned.
Yes, it's more of an invisible thing, but it's I think we mentioned this in a previous podcast. It's not necessarily that people remember exactly what you said, but it's how you made them feel. So if you made them feel welcome as the community, or you made them feel like they could easily find the content they needed, then they're going to keep on coming back and accessing what you're providing to them. So, they may not necessarily remember everything you presented at your developer event, but the fact is that they know and they are encouraged to continue using your resources.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. And I like to use, there's this quote from Jeff Bezos actually, and the quote goes that if we take care of our customers, the stock will take care of itself in the long term. And I think if you simply replace customer with developer, and maybe the stock, but just say if we take care of developers, I guess the stock will take care of itself in the long term. I mean, that's in a way what we're doing, right? We're just helping developers, and in the long run, I think they'll take care of the company.
Yeah. I think there's been a growing understanding that developers do take care of the company, whereas perhaps 5 or 10 years ago, developers were quite niche to technical companies. Now almost every company needs developers to do something with them, whether it's use their third-party product or use a service that they provide, or just be compliant with something that they're providing, so that it gains some traction and is taken up by more of the marketplace. So when we're talking about developers as customers, or replacing the word customer with developer, how do you see the difference between a standard customer and a developer customer? What's the big kind of overriding differentiator?
So I think, again, for developer advocates or developer relations people, it's, the developer is the customer, right? And, I think at the end, as the code says, right, if we take care of the customer or the developer, and again, by taking care, I think this is, just helping them, helping solve their problems. And I think genuinely help them. They, obviously, if they like what they see, if they see that your service or product helps them solve their problem, helps them be a better developer, helps them do something faster, they'll obviously, well, hopefully, and they'll buy your service or product, and and that will in turn make your company successful, right? And that in turn, if you're public, will probably make your stock successful.
Yeah. But I think another thing is that developers like other developers. So whereas customers, I suppose these days we all go on Amazon and read the reviews or Trustpilot or whatever. But developers in particular have always done this, haven't they? It's always very, very much what are other developers saying about this product? As a customer, I don't really want to know what the marketeers are telling me about it. I want to know what other developers that use it are telling me, and I want to know that those developers will be there in a community to help me solve the same problems that they encountered.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked a little bit about your role and how you've worked from a very small company up to a big company. What do you particularly love about developer marketing? What is it that gets you up every morning and takes you into the office?
Yeah. So for me, it's just helping people, right? And I guess people, developers. But it just makes you feel good when you can help someone. And just genuinely help them be successful. And I think when I have a question or I have a problem, and I reach out to someone and they help me, and that makes me feel good, right? It's like, oh, there is sort of they help me, and now I can do this, and I can do this better, easier, faster. That makes me feel good. And I think sort of something very similar I want us to do, for developers, right? If someone is having a problem with something, if we can help them, hopefully they have the same feeling.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah, you're giving them warm and fuzzies because you've done very much what's helped for you. Did you think that you'd end up in that kind of reciprocal relationship when you were younger and a developer, or is this very much an unexpected career development for you?
Yeah, I did not think I would end up in this role. I started as a Java developer, But I think after Evite, after I joined XRL, which is a professional services organization, although they did have a number of open source products, I started doing a lot of demos for potential customers or clients, and I think that's how I sort of this is a lot of fun. I can help, I can teach, and I can show how this product can help them solve their problems. And I think that's where that sort of transition into developer relations, developer advocacy started for me. So again, I just enjoyed teaching, and I've actually, for some time, I was traveling a lot and actually teaching 3, 4, 5 day courses and doing trainings on site. And again, I enjoy that. And so again, I think that's where my transition sort of started.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess those developers that are older like me have all done the kind of professional courses where you sit in a room for 4 or 5 days and you work through the paper slides and do a few examples. Do you think that's the best way to learn how to code, and then you kind of go back into your day job and you try and apply it? Or do you think developers these days have got a much kind of easier or different route to learning, such as platforms where you can code along? I'm thinking of Udemy and some of the Udacity programs. What would be your opinion of the best way for developers to learn, or is it very different for each developer?
Yeah, I think like a lot of things, right? It's probably very different for every developer, and sort of also depending on what they're looking for, so maybe their requirements. But I think for us, for my team, we try to do a lot of hands-on events, right? So when we run a meetup, we try not to make it like a lecture style, but an actual hands-on workshop, because it is probably one of the best ways to learn, where you actually build something. So we say, hey, bring your laptop. It's an hour and a half hands-on workshop, and we're gonna show you how to build, how to code, how to deploy something small. Obviously, it has to be something small. But again, I think that's one of the best ways to learn is when you try. So yes, I think hands-on is still a great way.
So is that the end of books then? Developer books are just a thing of the past, or is there still a place for paper publishing?
No, I mean, books are obviously still, and will be probably for a very long time, still very, very important. But again, I think, reading a book is great, but you still need to practice, and you still need to, run into problems, and you still need to run into bugs, right? And you still need to figure out how to fix them. Again, just based on my personal experience, I can read a book and look at the code and then think, oh, now I know how to do this. But no, once you start coding, you run into challenges and problems and bugs, and so. And of course, if you're at a hands-on event, you can all ask questions. We've got developer advocates, and you can, hey, this doesn't work, so they can show that person, how to solve this particular problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there still is a place for books. As as I said, as an older developer, that's pretty much how I learned, was going around the tube in London reading books on C++ and various other topics. But you're right, you don't take in as much as you think you do, and you need to sit there and code. So I think developers these days probably have a lot more tools and opportunities, but then of course there is a lot more to learn, because it seems like every week there's a new framework or a new language to try and experiment with. It's a really difficult environment that a lot of people find, and I guess that's what we do at Slash Data, is we try and look at what people are finding popular and finding useful, and pick out the trends as we see them as the developers report them to us. Have you kind of spotted any of this?
Yeah, no, I know. On one hand, there are just so many amazing tools, and there's so many tools to make development easy and fast, which is awesome. But as you said, but on the other hand, there's just so many tools, so many frameworks, so many different platforms. How do you, right? And there's a new one every day. So
yes,
how do you?
Exactly, and you can jump into the open source community for that one, and then you're contributing here, there, and everywhere.
Yes. So how do you choose the right one, right? And of course, if you go back, 10, 15, or even 20 years, right? So you had a lot less choices. So that was maybe not as good, but then as you were starting or looking, you had only, again, a few frameworks to choose from, or maybe even just one.
Well, that's right. You could write with MFC or ATL or whatever.
Yeah, no. So yeah, every I don't know, every time has its own, advantages and disadvantages.
Yes.
Like everything.
Definitely. Yeah. I certainly don't want to come across as, these new kids, they've got so much more going for them, because I totally understand how difficult that must be. And I guess that's why, there's people like you providing education, and it's people like Slashdata providing information to guys like you. So where to pitch your tent and where to direct people. What in IBM have you been up to recently? I believe you run lots of events, day events. Is that correct?
Yeah, so because we're, I guess, more of like a local team, yes, we do run a lot of events. And so we run in-person events. And as I mentioned, so we try to make them hands-on events. We, in the evening, kind of a more traditional time, we also run a lunch and learn event during lunch, and we provide lunch. And, this works really well because, I think a lot of people who are in San Francisco, for example, during the day, some of them don't want to stay for an evening event. They want to go home and to their families, kids or partners, or go to the gym, or just do nothing, maybe watch Netflix. And they, rather not stay in the city. But of course, they're there during lunch. And that works really well for us. And, again, we provide lunch. My guess, that's what attracts people. We hope it's the content. But if it's the lunch, that's fine. We don't mind. What else? We also run an online event once a week. And, again, if you don't want to go to a lunch event, if you don't want to go to an evening event, you can, of course, join us online from anywhere, and you can watch the recording. So that, of course, allows us to scale. And even though we're a team in San Francisco Bay Area, people anywhere in the world can join the live event, but of course, watch the recording, anytime from anywhere.
Oh, right. Yeah, that sounds good. I think I might have a go at that. I really like the idea of the lunch and learn event, because I think, as a woman developer, I have to get home because I've got a family to look after. That's not saying that all women developers have that, or that it's just women that do it. I should clarify. But, I know that I have childcare requirements, and I can't stay to evening events in the city. So I think it's absolutely fantastic that you're providing different opportunities at different times, because I don't think every company does. And I think if we want to encourage diversity in developer communities, this is exactly the right way to go. And I think you've worked with a few different organisations to build diversity. Is that correct?
Yes. So exactly. So we work with organizations such as Women Who Code and other organizations, and and we support them, and we sponsor them, and then we go and when they have their meetups, we go and we provide very similar developer education to their communities. So again, number one, we want to support them because I think they're doing a really amazing job in the community, and also we want to reach new developers, and I think working with other communities is a really great way to do that. In a similar fashion, we work with other companies. Being in San Francisco, there are, again, so many companies we can work with, but just some examples. For example, we host joint events with Slack, with Twilio, with Cloudinary, and many, many other companies in this area. And again, it works out great for us.
Yeah, that's really interesting way to sort of mix it up. So, IBM's got a huge heritage, and you've been there 2 years. What would you say is the best thing about working for the Big Blue, and how have you found it in comparison to working with your startups that you've previously worked in?
Yeah, again, obviously very, very different environment, but I'm going to say that, working at IBM has been really incredible. The people that I work with, and of course I spend most of the time in the developer advocacy organization, but even outside, people are just amazing. They're always, ready and ready to help you. Yeah, again, coming into IBM from a small startup, I was, a little bit hesitant, going from this to this huge company, but my experience has been just really, really amazing.
It's a rich heritage in the company, which must kind of run in seams, I guess, through the expertise of its employees.
Yes, and everyone's very supportive. I love it.
So we talked a little bit about the events, and we also talked about diversity, but kind of stepping back from the diversity a bit more to identity. I've asked other people about developer communities and whether they feel they have a very particular identity. Do you feel that certain events have? So, for example, I've been to WWDC, and I always feel that is incredibly intense. Whereas some of the Amazon events are much more relaxed and kind of fun. It's not to say that WWDC isn't fun, but there's a different vibe at these. Do you feel that the IBM events you do, the day events, have a particular identity? And was that something that you decided, or does it come about from the developers attending, or does it not exist at all? Am I just kind of making this up?
Yeah, so I think for us, because our events are very very informal, very easygoing, and so they're obviously open to everyone. So we don't necessarily sort of have like a theme, but as you said, I think just whoever comes, everyone is welcome. So that's how I think that's how it works. But because again, they're small. We're talking about 30 to 40, 50 people events. They're again very informal, very easygoing. I don't think we sort of have like a persona for our small events.
But I think it works quite well that way, because then it's the people that are there form a real relationship with the others in the event. They get to know others that maybe they wouldn't otherwise meet. As you say, because it's a lot more relaxed, perhaps you get a bit more from it. Whereas at a bigger event, it can be quite intimidating for some developers, particularly those that are struggling perhaps to make conversation with people they don't know.
Yes.
Whereas you're forced to, it's more.
Yeah, and we see people. We have students coming. We have people who just finished like a coding camp. We have designers coming and project managers, product managers, and we got startup developers and enterprise developers, and everyone in between. So yeah, and we love this when we have everyone. So that's I think. For us, that's kind of the core of the community is inviting everyone, and where anyone with any background really can join and learn.
Yeah, that sounds great. I think that's the real essence of developer marketing is that you can get anybody there, anybody can do it, anybody can learn something, and everyone's welcome. That's really interesting, Max. Thank you so much for joining the podcast. And to the listener, thank you for listening to Under the Hood of Developer Marketing Season 2. Is a podcast devoted to developer marketing and relations. If you want to listen to other episodes, you can subscribe at developermarketingpodcast.com or follow us on Twitter at /DataHQ for regular updates. Thanks, Max.
Thank you. It was fun.